So we know coming up at the end of the month, there is the WHO pandemic treaty, where the whole goal is basically to get every country to give up their sovereignty under the power of the WHO, under the World Health Organization. And so that is coming up. But also coming with it is the UN Blue Helmet military branch that can be freely deployed in any country that's under this WHO pandemic treaty. So we're going to take a look at that. This thing is kind of flown under the radar, but it was just published in March of this year. Let's take a look. This thing is called Our Common Agenda Policy Brief 2, Strengthening the International Response to Complex Global Shocks, an emergency platform. Again, this was in March 2023. You can see United Nations, and at the bottom right, there's the SDG logo, Sustainable Development logo that comes out of Agenda 2030. Now, while the policy brief states this wouldn't be a standing body or entity, only a set of protocols that would be activated, a protocol could entail deploying UN blue helmets wherever they deem a global shock is happening. So while it wouldn't be a standing entity, that would be a protocol that they can initiate. Of course, with all the things that they try and do, they try to make them as vague and general as possible to make it sound good on the outside, but can still be twisted in how they want to do it. The document wants to give the UN Secretary General standing authority to initiate the emergency platform. So this is straight from the document. This is building on the ideas in our common agenda. Common agenda is always just freaky. That's just more one world right there. And learning lessons from these recent crises, I propose that the General Assembly provide the Secretary General and the United Nations system with a standing authority to convene and operationalize automatically an emergency platform in the event of a future complex global shock of sufficient scale, severity, and reach. Okay. To put this simply, to put this layman terms, basically what they're saying is if the WHO declares something a pandemic, or like another pandemic happens, or a global shock of that type, if that was to happen, they will have the power to then deploy the UN military into whatever country is a part of that treaty to help the situation that's going on. That's what this is about. So the WHO pandemic treaty is to get everybody on board and under their rules, under their power. And at the same time, this is going to basically give power to the UN blue helmets to deploy military anywhere they see fit. That's what they're trying to do with this. Now the question is, what do they deem a global shock? What's the global shock on this thing? Well, just a quick little thing straight from the document again. Their complex global shocks could be major climatic event, future pandemic risks. You notice it says risk. It doesn't even just say pandemic. It said risk. Interesting. Event involving biological agents. Disruption to global flows of goods or people, so your supply chain stuff. Cyberspace, global digital connectivity disruption. So, cyber attack could trigger this thing. Major event in outer space, okay? I guess you can start looking into their alien theory right there. Once the rapture happens, that would be considered a complex global shock because it would trigger alien invasion, I'm sure. And then just as general and vague as possible, unforeseen black swan event. Like I said, they're trying to make things as simple, not simple. They're trying to make things as general and vague as absolutely possible. Now, the thing that's interesting is they have an entire section about cost of living crisis, which what we know is coming up because we're talking about the central bank digital currencies and we're seeing all the bank stuff getting closed down and everything. We know that this thing is coming and it's going to be a global collapse. So just think, if a cost of living crisis happens, and again, scripture, we know, bread will cost a day's wage. We understand that that's coming. That could trigger, and they could literally deploy the UN military in every single country at the same time. You want to talk about a world police force? There's your world police force. There it is. So, what we got coming up in May is a lot more than just the WHO pandemic treaty, where they're going to take sovereignty away from anybody who signs on to it. They're also bringing a military force that they want to deploy at any time that they deem to be a global shock. So this thing is dangerous. This thing is dangerous. And I just don't think, because I didn't even know until I looked into this, I just don't think we have a firm grasp on how intrusive and deadly this pandemic treaty is going to be coming up in May. We talk about it loosely, but it's going to be bad. Luckily, the same Bible that tells us that all this stuff was coming, because we don't need to worry, we don't need to listen to the prophetic word of Mr. Jacques Attali there. When we open up Scripture, we also understand that we've got a God that is bigger than all of this, who's going to protect us from this. And he's also going to suck us out of here before things get really bad. For those of us who have Jesus, of course. So if you don't have Jesus, you need to get to him.